Okay, I'm recording. Oy vey, now I got to really watch what I'm saying. Dangerous words, recording in progress. So I was behind just getting my coffee here, and I was listening to some of the conversation before I came on. And what I loved was that this is such a Jewish thing to say. I was on the poor neighborhood. I lived in a more poor neighborhood than you lived in. You think that you were, north, I was north of Ulster. You were south of Ulster. Only Jews can brag about the fact that we lived in the poorer side. And I know that because growing up in Bathurst Manor, we lived on the west side of Wilmington on Kennard. And if you lived on the east side of Wilmington, on the other side of the park, they called it, you were in the fancier area because you were closer to Bathurst Street.
Oh,
that was a big deal.
I have to ask a question. I have this thing on my screen. I can't get rid of it about the meeting being recorded. How do you get rid of it?
Press OK. Take your mouse and go on the button and press that you're accepting that.
There's no OK. Oh, it says got it.
got it.
Yeah,
Got
click
it.
on got it.
Oh, I got, look who's here. Hi. I just visited with your wife yesterday in the cold.
Terrific. Welcome. So welcome to the Francis Harris show. Oh, sorry, I muted you. I shouldn't mute you. Go ahead. You want to say something?
No.
Okay. All right. No, you don't want to say anything? All right. Well, if you do, feel free to ask questions during this session. And if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know the answer. So how did I come to any of this in the first place? I'll tell you, when COVID hit, I was already learning for the last couple of years before COVID, Talmud and all the sources and Gemara with Jay Kelman. And we would sit at chat usually once a week, and we would have a chavruta, and we were learning together. And once the school was shut down and I couldn't go there anymore, I was sitting at home and driving myself crazy. You can only watch so much Donald Trump and on Fox News before so Laura said to me, either get out of the house or learn something. So I decided I would go back to school. So I looked for a serious program, and there's a program which I invite all of you to look at and to go to if you wish. It's called webyeshiva.org. So Web Yeshiva is, it's not like a black hat organization. It's a modern Orthodox yeshiva in Israel. And most of the teachers are rabbis that are teaching at Midrash at Lindenbaum, with Wat Yeshiva University, or they're teaching at Yeshiva University. And some of them are almost semi-retired. One of them that I've been studying with since that time when I decided I would take the courses is Rabbi David Fink. And Rabbi Fink is a posek. He's someone who actually makes decisions for communities on Jewish halakha and Jewish law. Anyway, it really appealed to me. And I thought, why don't I go in and learn halakha? So you know me, I always jump in feet first. Rather than just saying, I'll take one course and I'll see how it goes, I sign up for something which I don't even know what it is. I sign up for a program called A Mastery in Halakha, but I have no idea what a mastery in halakha is. So I go to the first class and I'm writing notes, and I have no clue what I'm doing because I haven't been to school for so long. So I'm writing notes. I'm going to show you the scribbling on a page with the sources of what my notes started to look like at the first couple classes. You see all the scribbling on the pages?
Yeah.
So those are all like the footnotes on the scribbling. So I'm just scribbling all over the page. And this goes on for about 2-3 weeks. And Laura comes into the kitchen, my wife, and she looks at my notes and she says to me, those aren't notes. That's scribbling. You have to take proper notes if you want to be able to learn. And so there is exams in this. There's midterms and there's final exams in each course. And so my notes started to become more like this, organized, you see? So I started to take down proper notes, like you're going to school, like go to school. And what happened was, it comes to the midterm exam, and I'm writing notes and I'm taking as much as I can, doing whatever I can learn. And the midterm was really hard. Like I hadn't written an exam for so long. So I write the exam, and the Rabbi Brovsky comes on to the next lesson, and he said, some of you did very well on the exam. Some of you didn't do so well on the exam. And some of you, I'm going to have to make a phone call to. He said, this is a university level course. It's for people that want to really be serious. And if you're not going to be serious, then don't come to these classes. Very tough. Anyway, I managed to squeak by with a B. I didn't get an A+, but I got a B in the first test. And I realized I got to really buckle down. You have to really be willing to give all of the sources. This is what they were asking for. They didn't care about you repeating back to them what they taught you, because I thought I would impress them and say, in Rabbi Brovsky's class, I learned such and such and such and such. I thought if I brown nose him, he'll look at it and he'll say, and he wrote back, I don't care what Rabbi Brovsky said. I care what the Gedolim said, what the rabbis and the Gemara said, and that's what I care about. If you're not going to give me sources, don't tell me back what I taught you. So they're not afraid to let you know when you're not doing things to what their expectations are. So the idea of this is you have to complete 6 courses, and in the 6 courses, 3 of them are what they call mandatory courses, and 3 are electives. So one of them is a course called Kashrut. You learn basar b'chalav, and I started to learn this. And I realized that by the time you go through all of these sources, you spend all day learning what the bottom line is in a very simple thing. Why couldn't they just say, this is the rule, follow that? Why? Because they want to teach us how to learn. It's not good enough for me to tell you what the rule is if I don't explain to you where it came from. You might want to know, how did this happen? So if you came here because you wanted a recipe for chicken soup, I can give you those, and I can tell you how to cook and what I do for cooking, and we'll have those fun classes. But this is not that. This is about keeping a kosher home, something that I thought I followed, and learned that some of the things that I was doing were not right, and some of the things that you're doing may not be right, and some of you don't even care. And some of you are only here because you want the knowledge and the learning, and that's okay too. If you don't follow any of the rules, I'm not here to criticize you. If you choose to follow a rule, then that's blessings upon you, as the rabbis say. Blessings should be upon you for following the rules. So as I embarked on this course, it's a 3-year program. I'm in the 2nd year now. And if you finish this program, they can let you into what they call their smicha program, their rabbinic program, to get ordination. So I thought to myself, could I get into this program? The truth is, I can't get into the Web Yeshiva program, probably for smicha, because it's an Orthodox RCA organization, and they're not going to let in a guy who davens in a conservative synagogue to be part of the program, even if you can pass all of the exams. So what I did was, I found an even more frum organization in Crown Heights, a yeshiva in Crown Heights. And I spoke to the rabbi there, and I told him exactly what I'm doing and where I am and where I'm learning. And he said to me, do you keep Shabbos? I said, yes. He said, what are you learning now? I told him. He said, you know what? This is the way he talks. Their English is a little bit not like our English. He goes, it'll be all right. Next Elul, you'll call me, we'll put you in. I was shocked. I said, what does that mean? He says, so next September, to phone him, and he would let me into the programs online. He invited me to go to Crown Heights, actually, to study in the yeshiva there, to go there. But I can't do that. I have a job in Toronto. So he said, you can attend all of the shiurim in the classes, but if you pass the exams, you can earn smicha with us. So who knows? Will I do it? Will I not do it? I have no idea. I don't know. In the meantime, I'm a chazan, but I'm a chazan who's interested in Jewish law. In the Gemara and the Talmud, there's a rabbi named Mar Ukva. They don't call him Rabbi Ukva, they call him Mar Ukva. And he had an expression, and his expression went like this. He said, my father is wine, I am vinegar. What does that mean? Well, we know what it means. Vinegar isn't as tasty to drink as wine, right? Wine is the fine, the good stuff. If you leave wine to spoil, it becomes vinegar. Now, from Mar Ukva, a famous Rav like that, to use an expression like that, what he's meaning is that his father waited 24 hours between dairy and meat, between basar and chalav. 24, what a stringency. Can you imagine if I said to you, you have to wait 24 hours to have ice cream? I mean, thank God we have parv ice cream, but that's a lot of waiting. Why 24 hours? Maybe he thought that 24 hours is the amount of time that it would take for the body to get rid of the milchiks in him. Maybe that's how long it takes. You know, so that would be what we call a physical definition. You eat something dairy or meat, you wait a day, and hopefully by then naturally you get rid of that through your body. And that would be a physical thing. Or maybe he felt that meat and milk should not be eaten together as an experiential thing. You know, we know from the Torah that it says, don't boil a calf in its mother's milk, right? So what does that mean, to boil a calf in its mother's milk? That is mamish. Mamish is yeshiva talk. You know what I mean? Mamash. It means literally to take a piece of meat and boil it in milk. Well, we don't do that. I don't think anybody in this Zoom meeting is doing that. But what about, it doesn't say meat and milk in the Torah as how long you should wait between. There's no direction on that. So my answer is, we are not Torah Jews anymore. Yes, we believe in the Torah, and we learn from the Torah, and we use the Torah sources as an example. But what we are rabbinic Jews. We follow our rabbis. Now, for better or for worse, we don't have a Beit HaMikdash. We don't have a temple anymore. So we can't follow certain rules that involve Kohanim, or certain rules that involve the Beit HaMikdash. At that time, they had a Sanhedrin. You know what a Sanhedrin is? It's a team of leadership, of rabbis that would sit down and discuss and make rules. I wish we had a Sanhedrin today, but we can't until there's another Beit HaMikdash, which means we're stuck. We're stuck in the times of the Gemara. We're stuck in the rules that were made then, and they haven't really changed so much. But what our modern poskim, our modern rabbis are able to do is to create what we call leniencies. So you have a strict opinion, you've got a liberal opinion, you've got an opinion in the middle. Some will follow the more strict opinion, some will follow the more lenient opinion. And what we are all supposed to say is, blessings upon those who follow the strict opinion. But we won't mock, this is very important, we won't mock someone who follows a more lenient opinion. If there is a source, if there is a Gemara ruling, if there is a psak, a ruling, and it's more lenient, and it's followed by the general consensus of most rabbis, then you can follow it. So you go to the grocery store, and you know, it's the lady in the grocery store. Why is it a lady? I'm not going to say that. It's the man in the grocery store. The man in the grocery store is behind the deli counter. On that side, they have cheese. On that side, with a divider in the middle, they have meat. It's a kosher store. And he doesn't know anything. They hired him. They were busy, and they didn't train him properly. He doesn't know anything. And he takes the bologna and he slices the bologna for you. You want 6 slices. But you don't want them from the end. You want them from the middle. You know, that's a Jewish thing. We always got to have not the end pieces. We want the middle. There's a joke about that. So you get the 6 slices. And now I say to him, and I'd like 6 slices of Havarti. So he goes over there on the other side, and he slices the 6 slices of the Havarti cheese, which you have to pay an arm and a leg for because it's kosher. And then he takes the 2 of them, he puts them in a package together. There's no barrier. He just puts the meat on top of the cheese in the package, and you don't look, and he gives it to you, and you're at home, and you open up the package, and you just about have a heart attack because the bologna is sitting on top of the cheese in the package. What do you do? What do you do? Can someone tell me, what do you do?
Take it back.
You take
Give
it back?
It's
All right,
not
it's
your
far,
fault.
it's raining. I don't want to go back. I'm probably not even gonna, I don't want to take it back.
It's not your
Separate the-
fault. You're not
Separate the
responsible.
two and take one piece of bologna out so that it doesn't touch the cheese. Take the first piece of cheese, throw out those two
Throw it
things.
out.
Leonard, you should become a
Yes.
rabbi with Celia together. The two of you should become rabbinah.
Okay.
So the
She's
answer-
my mashgiach.
You were a mashgiach?
She is my mashgiach.
Oh, well, you know what? You're not far off. Can I go so far as to say something that's radical? Don't go around and quote this to the frum community that I said this, because they'll say he doesn't know what he's talking about, but he does know what he's talking about, because this comes from Gedolim at Yeshiva University. And they would never do this, by the way. But you can take the cheese that touched the bologna and the meat that touched the cheese, and you can wash it, and
Oh,
eat it. Wait, and eat it. Not together, of course, at the same time. You can eat it. So why would nobody do that? Why? Because it doesn't feel right to us. It doesn't feel right. We feel, you know what, we're privileged. We're all, thank God, could afford that slice of cheese. I'll tell you, in the frum community, they wouldn't even take it off Leonard and Celia and eat the slices that weren't touching. They'd throw the whole thing in the garbage, or they would take it back, right? But they would never eat it. But the truth is, if you washed it, you can actually eat it. Why? Because there's something in the Gemara that talks about shuman. Shuman is the fat. And if the fat is not being absorbed into the product, because there was a process that I didn't mention in this, right? What's the process? Cooking. There was no cooking. There was no actual cooking. So the answer is, you know, if there's no cooking and they're both cold and you took them and you washed it, and nobody's going to do this, you would be halachically within the law.
oh,
Now, there is something else which we're going to learn about later on in another class called a klipa. A klipa is, we'll get to this more later, but just to give you an example, because it's similar along these lines. You took a fleshik knife. Can I use the word fleshik in this group? All right. And you
Yes.
and you cut a cucumber, and you cut the cucumber, and you know, you put it back in the fridge. Now tomorrow you're making a cheese sandwich and you want to use the same cucumber for your cheese sandwich. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to take a klipa. A klipa means a slice off the end, and then you can go ahead and use the rest of the cucumber. So what do we learn? We learn that that's the advantage of having a parv knife. If you even have one parv knife in the house that's only used for vegetables and for fruit, then it renders it neither nisht and neither here. Like it's neutral. You can use that cucumber the next day without thinking about a klipa. Now, b'di'eved, another word that we hear in yeshivish language. You'll hear me use the word b'di'eved a lot in the next 6 sessions. So b'di'eved means intentionally. And you know the word lehatchil in Hebrew. Lehatchil means to start with. So there's another yeshiva phrase which someone who's learning will use the word lechatchila, which means to start with. You intended on doing something. So b'di'eved is unintentional. B'di'eved is I didn't mean to do it. An example. I'm leaning against the wall and I'm talking to you, and it's Shabbos, and my shoulder hits the light switch on the wall. Big deal. It's b'di'eved. We use lights on Shabbos anyway. You're allowed to have a timer, turn the light off and turn the light off on Shabbos. We didn't do it intentionally. We'll talk about that in another session. I'm going to do 6 sessions later on technology. Technology is very interesting. But you leaned against the wall and the light went on. It's a b'di'eved thing. You were on your way, b'di'eved, on your way, and you accidentally flipped so you leave it. So leave it alone. Lechatchila means intentionally. So you b'di'eved cut a cucumber with a meat knife, and now you want to use that cucumber for dairy. and you forgot and you used it, you can eat it. You can go ahead and eat it. Nothing will happen. The roof won't fall down, and you're not in violation of rabbinic law. It wasn't intentional. Lechatchila, if you did it intentionally, then it's a problem. I'm going through some of this just to give you the foundation for where my classes are going to be going. What do? You took a meat knife from your kitchen and you sliced an onion. Now, you slice the onion. What happens to that onion?
Nothing.
Nothing. Something happens to the onion because I cut it with a meat knife. So guess what? An onion is considered by rabbinic law to be a hot. Is an onion spicy and hot? It is, right? So because of its pungency, it has the same status as garlic. So therefore, with garlic and with onions, if you weren't using a parve knife, a certain knife, then it renders that entire onion as a meat onion. How many of us follow that? I'm not telling you to follow it. I'm just telling you it does. Whether you like it, whether you believe it, whether or not, once you use, there's a heat transfer. As soon as you take that meat knife and you cut into the onion, you're not even supposed to take off a section of the onion. I mean, I suppose you could if you took a parve knife, then you could go and cut off a section of the onion and continue. But these are the kinds of things that become problematic that we don't think about in the kitchen. You know, you take a knife, you cut the onion, you use the next half of the onion the next day for cooking. You don't even think about whether it's dairy, whether it's meat, you're not cooking them together. Another thing that happens in the kitchen, you cooked pasta and you cooked the pasta in a dairy pot. You weren't thinking about what you're putting on it. You know, you're thinking pasta and sauce and cheese. That's what I think about when I think of pasta. I think of pasta, sauce, and cheese. You cooked the pasta and you cooked it in a dairy pot. Your partner, your friend, your whoever's coming over for dinner comes in the house and says, I brought the meatballs for the pasta. And you're thinking, oh my God, that was the last pasta. I don't have any more pasta in the house. All I have is the pasta that I cooked in the dairy pot. And this person wants me to serve it with meatballs. I suppose you could say, save your meatballs, we'll have them tomorrow on a sandwich. But no, you want the meatballs. Can you eat the meatballs with the pasta that was cooked into the dairy pot? Ruth says no. The answer is, it depends. It's a Jewish thing. You ever heard that word? It depends. What does it depend on? You could say it depends on how strict you are. It depends on, well, I didn't do it on purpose. I cooked it thinking we're having cheese. If I did it on purpose, lechatchila, that's a problem. You know what? Leonard's coming over for dinner with Sila, and I'm going to intentionally cook mine in a dairy pot to screw things up because they're bringing over meatballs, and I want to really make a pogrom of this. That's ridiculous. Nobody would do that anyway. But that's what I'm talking about. This is an accident. It's a b'diavad thing. I was on my way to making pasta. I cooked it in a dairy pot. So here's the ruling. The ruling by our rabbis is, if you cooked it in a pot that was Eino ben Yomo, what is a yom?
Day.
A day. So Eino ben Yomo, the pot has not been used for 24 hours. I didn't cook in that pot for 24 hours. The pot was sitting for 24 hours. Then you can take the pasta from that dairy pot because it's Eino ben Yomo, and you can go ahead and you can mix it in a neutral, in a meat pot, and you can eat it, no problem, and it's kosher. Interesting. So why is that? It's because of the laws that the rabbis came down with, the fences and the laws that said bishul, cooking meat and milk together, is forbidden. But if something hasn't been used for 24 hours, there's all kinds of leniencies. You could even, if you didn't even know that you cooked it in a dairy pot. You were thinking, I cooked it in a meat pot, and you ate it unintentionally. You didn't even think about it. And now you're washing up and you go, oh my God, the mark on this pot is blue. Blue in my house means dairy. The red marks are meat. I just served everybody pasta in a dairy pot that I cooked, and I didn't know it, with meat that was cooked over here. Oy gewalt, what's going to happen? Well, have you heard of soap and water? So it's funny. I laugh about it, but the rabbis came up with a fence. They came up with a leniency of something called notain tam leaf gum, a bad taste, a sour taste. I mean, you wouldn't intentionally take soap and eat soap. So if you give the utensils the taste of soap and you clean it, then technically it would be okay. That's in a circumstance, but we don't really follow that intent. What we do is we kosher it. And how do you kosher something? And we'll talk about that again later, but very quickly, the way you traced it up is the way you kosher it. Very simple. If you boiled water in the pot and you traced up the pot because you did something you weren't supposed to do, you know what happened? It was an accident. You go forward, but you take the pot and you pour boiling water into the pot until it's about to overflow. And you boil it, and when the water goes over the sides, it's koshered. And then you can go ahead and you can use the pot again. You can kosher a pot. Not a pot with Teflon, but we'll talk about that another time. They can't be kosher. You have to throw it out. Throw it in the garbage. It's Teflon coated. Same thing with a frying pan. You trafe up a frying pan. You cook cheese in a frying pan. I don't know if anybody does that, but by accident. And now what do? The frying pan wasn't used for 24 hours, so you're not worried about trafing it up. It's Eno Ben Yomo. Plus, you are worried about reusing that pot again. You want to use this, so you have to do with Aish. You have to take a torch, and the way you heat up a pan is with fire, because it's over either a gas stove or over an element. You have to take out the trafeness, as they call it, by taking a torch and putting it over top of the pan. There is a leniency that says that libun, it's called. Libun is to heat up a pan like that. Libun kal, which means a cold way of doing it. So you could take it and you could just put it over a gas top and heat it up to its hottest temperature that it can take, and then take it off. If it's white hot, then some leniencies will say that that's already kosher. But going back to the beginning of the conversation about the dairy and the meat, how did they separate it? How did they come to? If I ask everybody in the room how long you wait, everybody will have a different answer. Some will say, my father waited 6 hours. I hear that all the time. My father waited 6 hours. What they don't want to say to you is I don't wait 6 hours, but I don't want to sound like I don't know what I'm doing. So I'll tell you what my father did. My father waited 6 hours. So somebody asked me, Marshall, what do you follow? I would say my father waited 6 hours. My father did wait 6 hours in between. He was very strict about that, but he wasn't so strict about other things. It's funny. There was the Bahag. The Bahag in the Talmud is the Baal Halachot Gedolot. He wrote a book called Baal Halachot Gedolot, the big book of halachas. And he said, what do you got to wait for? What's you don't have to wait for it to go out of your body. There's no Torah prohibition for this. Just clean your teeth. And he called it kinoach. He said, kinoach. Clean your teeth. What did they use back then to clean your teeth? I don't know. Maybe they had a wooden stick and they didn't have Pepsodent or all the toothpaste that we have today. But I guess rinse your mouth. So they came up with a way. How do you rinse your mouth? You chew bread. Bread is allowed. Vegetables was not allowed. That wasn't considered quinoa. But you should have the experiential experience. You should have the experience of cleaning your teeth, and that'll serve as a separation. So just cleaning your teeth would be enough. Then another rabbi comes along, the Rambam. Everybody knows Rambam, Maimonides, and Maimonides said, no, 6 hours. You got to wait 6 hours because we don't even know how to clean our teeth. This is back in those days. People don't clean their teeth. You think if you chew a piece of bread or you rinse your mouth out with water, you're getting the meat that's stuck between your teeth out. You got to wait at least 6 hours for get things unstuck from your teeth. Their teeth weren't as good as ours today. And Rashi was similar, and he also said that it's even more than what's stuck in your teeth. It's the idea of the taste of the meat still lingering. You still taste the lamb chop in your mouth. You can't go now and eat a cheese sandwich, right? So they came up with different rules, and different Rabbanim followed different ways. And then in Eastern Europe, it became anywhere from 1 to 6 hours. Well, I raised Madeline, my daughter, to wait 6 hours until I came to Beth David. I did something, this is revolutionary, and many of you will think that you'll say, I can't believe Marshall did this, but I did this. And now I'm questioning it. I came to the shul, and I found out that Rabbi Shaim waits 3 hours. He follows the Yeked, the Germanic custom. I said, how do you wait 3 hours? He said, well, when I came to the shul, Rabbi Pappenheim waited 3 hours. And it says a Selach HaRav, you have a rabbi, you could be a rabbi, that's your rabbi, you can follow your rabbi. I went home to my father, I said, Dad, Rabbi Shaim only waits 3 hours. He said, you're allowed to follow your rabbi. My father knew. He said, but, you can also follow your father too, right? Anyway, I'm thinking about this. I'm going, you know what? You eat lunch at noon and you want to have ice cream at 3, you can't have it. Didn't sound so good to me. So I adopted Rabbi Shaim's custom at that time. And I've been doing that now for 20 years. You know what I learned? There is no source. There is no real source for 3 hours. There's a source for 4 hours. There's a source for 5 hours. There's a source for 6 hours. And there's a minhag, a very strong minhag, a custom of 1 hour. Not even an hour and 10 minutes, 1 hour. The Dutch follow 1 hour. How do I know? Because Madeline marries a Vandersloot, and they follow the Dutch custom of 1 hour. You're allowed to take your husband's custom. So she says, this is fantastic. I'm getting married. I only have to wait an hour now. My grandchildren eat ice cream an hour after having meat. To me, it's weird. It's weird, but they do. So they wait 1 hour. They're following the custom of 1 hour. Well, the reason they came up with the 4 hour custom was because 2 things. People studying in yeshivot, and people that are serving in the army. You have a zman, you have a time that they eat in a yeshiva. They're all schooled there. They're eating at 5 o'clock. That's it, because then it's back to learning. None of this fooling around business. Dinner at, let's say, mincha at 5 and dinner at 5:30 and back to shiur. You know what I mean? In the army, they serve you a meal at a certain time. So you're drilling all day, you're doing the drills, and you eat lunch. I don't know what time do they eat lunch in the army, 12, 1 o'clock. So they eat lunch at 1 o'clock. Now it's 6 o'clock and they're serving dinner. You're in Israel in the army, and now they're serving you dinner, and they're serving you basar, and it's 5 hours. So the rabbis came up with a leniency for people studying in yeshiva and people in times of need. Here's the way they say it. If there's great sorech means tzarich, I need. Tzarich, I need tzarich, I need. Sorech means a need. There's a need. If there's a need, we can be a little lenient. So now it becomes, well, so we're not waiting quite. We'll wait 5 hours and 1 minute. That's like almost 6 hours. It's 5 hours in a minute. So it's like into the 6th hour. You know, Jackie Mason would have a field day in his time. I don't, he's not around anymore. I think he passed away, right? I don't know.
Yes.
He would have had a great field day with that material, because I'm waiting sort of 5 hours, but not exactly 5 hours. I'm waiting 5 hours in a minute. 5 hours in a minute is almost like 6 hours. It's close enough. We'll do, you know what I mean? So it's close enough. Then there was a leniency for the 1 hour and a leniency for the 5 hours. So people said, well, you know, we don't eat lunch until 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock is when we finish, because you're eating lunch at 1 o'clock. By the time you finish chatting, by the time you finished eating the dessert on the meat plates, by the time you bench, by the time you put everything away. What does it mean, put everything away? The table. Did you know that in ancient times, they used to take the whole table away? So the table was brought in for a meal, and you would set up the meal, and they took the table away. And then for the next meal, they'd bring the table back and they'd set the table. Why would they do that? Because they had to clean the table. Because in those days, a lot of food was served directly on the table. They didn't have plates. You put the food on the table, they ate right off the table. So you're eating right off the table, and the table would have to be cleaned, or they have to put a cloth on it, which is another whole topic, by the way. What do? You have dairy, you have a tablecloth on the table, and you had dairy on the tablecloth, and now you want to have meat for lunch, and what do you do with the tablecloth? Do you take the tablecloth off and eat off the table? Do you use placemats? Some people have different customs, right? You're allowed to take the tablecloth off and turn it over and use the other side. Did you know that? You can do that. Just turn it over and eat off the other side. You can do that because it's considered a clean tablecloth. But some people change it and they put on a new one. Some people put it away and then they bring it back for me. There's all kinds of different customs. But what happens is a guy goes into the inn, a hotel. He's traveling. He's a traveling salesman. He's on the road. He walks into the inn. It's one of those dining rooms where everybody sits together, a communal dining table. And he's sitting there and he brought his food. He unpackages his meal. They let you bring your own food. And he unpackages it, and he has a double wrap because he's one of these glut guys. You know what I mean? Like the airplane. So he unpackages it and he's eating it. He takes up, by the time he gets the packaging done, the guy across from him, he's eating meat.
A bacon sandwich.
Okay, he's eating a bacon sandwich. We're going to go that far. He's not even eating kosher. He's not even eating kosher food. What do? You're in a community at a table. You can eat at the table, but you have to have a divider. You have to have something separating you. Even in the case of dairy and meat, you put a separation in. So maybe if there's a tablecloth on the table, you roll back the tablecloth so you're eating right on the tablecloth. That serves as a divider. Maybe you put a loaf of bread between you to separate you, because you know he's not going to reach over with his hands and grab your loaf of bread and eat your loaf of bread. You're safe for that, unless he's Meshiga. So, you know, but you can't put a plate of fries in between you, because he might put his hands in your fries and take the fries. You have to be careful what you put. And you're not allowed to put a jug of water, because you might share the jug of water. So it can't be a pitcher, but it can be something like a loaf of bread or a book or put a guitar on the table between you. I don't care what you put, but put something there so that the divider between the two of you. So that's one of the other things that we'll be talking about. And then there's another issue that comes when you talk about dairy and meat. And that is, besides the idea of cooking and koshering and waiting and the time and the space and all of these things, the sources are vast. And there's going to be an opinion that will be lenient and an opinion that will be strict, and there'll be an opinion in the middle, right? You don't necessarily follow the opinion in the middle. Often we follow the opinion collectively on the right, and somebody might follow the opinion on the left side, if we want to call it, or the middle. You are in a situation where you follow a minhag of 6 hours, and you're eating with someone who follows a minhag of 3 hours. So maybe they want to have a bowl of ice cream and they're sitting across from you. They're allowed to do that. It doesn't mean that you have to do it. So in the sources, we have books of laws, and all of these laws, okay, they're based on Torah prohibitions, or they're based on Talmud prohibitions. But there was a set of books called the Yad HaChazakah, Rambam's books, the Mishnah Torah. It's called the Mishnah Torah. And he wrote the Mishnah Torah as a set of books that would replace Gemara books. So a Gemara book, one book of the Gemara is this thick, right? That's a book from the Gemara. And the Rambam books, it's like show and tell here. I love it. The Rambam books are much thinner. Look. So Maimonides said, what do you got to read all this for? You're going to read about things that you don't need to know about. You're not a scholar. You're a farmer. Just learn the rules and don't worry about how we come to it. Here's the rules. Follow my rules and showing. It's enough. I'm telling you what to do. And, you know, what happens is from these books, the rules are here, pretty strict. But the rabbi said, who does he think he is? A chacham like this. A guy thinks he's going to eliminate the Gemara, and it's heresy. It's heretical. We're going to just follow his books. So they started taking his books. They said, you know what? Burn his books. Throw them in the fire and burn them. We're not following Rambam. This is back then. Because why should we follow only his books? There's other sources. Today, we do follow a lot of and we certainly look at the Rambam for advice for what we should follow, for all of the Hilchot. But we also have the Shulchan Aruch. Now, I'm not talking about the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. The Rabbi Gansfried is very right-wing, strict, right down the right side. I'm talking about the Shulchan Aruch, which was written by Yosef Karo. Joseph Karo wrote books of table of laws. They're labeled, most of the halachas regarding food are in Yoredeya, one of the volumes. And there's commentaries on the sides of the Shulchan Aruch. One is the commentaries of the Shach, and we'll talk about who the Shach is in another class. And one is the commentaries of the Taz. And the Shach and the Taz in their commentaries, guess what? Big surprise. They don't always agree. They, in fact, almost never agree. They're always coming up with a reason why shouldn't follow this, you shouldn't follow that. But there's always a bottom line. And we will come to the bottom lines and we'll figure it out together through the sources, what the bottom lines are and why we should follow them. You know, the Yosef Karo, before he wrote the Shulchan Aruch, he wrote volumes of books called the Beit Yosef, because he's Yosef. So why not call the book after yourself? If I wrote a Sefer, I'd call it the Marshall book, you know. Nobody would read it, but somebody might look at it. And even in Yosef Karo's book, and he's often referred to as the Mechaber. In Yosef Karo's books, he was of an opinion minded towards Sephardic Jewry, and that was great for them. But some of the Ashkenazi Jews said, why should we follow everything by him? We don't do it that way. We follow a different custom. We need someone to stand up for us. Well, there was another rabbi, and his name was Moshe Isserlis. Moshe Isserlis wrote, he's known as the Darchei Moshe. He wrote volumes called Darchei Moshe, but he is the commentary now on today's volumes of the Shulchan Aruch, who writes literature. He writes his column of what Ashkenazi Jews can follow, how it's paskind. Paskind is a word for what's determined. What is the bottom line? If we say it's paskind this way, it means that's the bottom line. That's what we follow. You choose not to follow it. That's your business, but that's what the bottom line is. So Moshe Isserlis had a custom. He said, many have the custom to eat meat after hard cheese, even though it gets stuck in the teeth. And some people said, if you chew bread and you get rid of the cheese, it's okay. Some people said it won't. One person said, chew bread, it'll clean your mouth out, and then you can go ahead and do whatever you want. And then another rabbi comes up and says, you can't just chew bread because it might lead someone to thinking that they can take a spoon of flour if they don't have bread and put flour in their mouth, and that'll like serve as a rinse out, because flour does not give kanuach, it sticks to the teeth. So when they came up with a rule, anything that sticks to your teeth is not considered naki. That's not considered lo kinuach nikiya. So then they start coming up with rulings of, is it soft cheese is okay, but hard cheese isn't okay? And if the soft cheese is okay, did the soft cheese come from a cow that was shechted in a kosher way so that we can even eat that cheese so that the rennet is kosher? And then we get into a whole issue of rennet becoming a new thing, a davar chadash. We'll talk about that another time also. Let's talk for a minute about meat with fish. Who eats meat with fish together on the same plate? And if you don't, why? Noreen does. I would. Leonard will. So some people don't do it. Why? Because my father didn't do it. Well, guess what? Your father and mother did something else that you probably don't do. I'll give you an example. I grew up, I was a little kid, and we had, growing up in Kennard Avenue, the windowsill in the kitchen that overlooked the little backyard in our bungalow. I can still see it in my head today. And it had plants on top of the shelf, like the windowsill. My mother had a few little plants up there. And my father, he was growing all kinds of plants. He was growing forks. He was growing knives. He was growing spoons. He was growing all of these. I said, Dad, why do you have the spoon stuck into the plant? And he said, someone put it in the wrong drawer. They put it in the wrong drawer. And he would get so upset if he opened the fleshik drawer and found the milchik knife in there. Gewalt, the house, I thought it was going to turn over. We used to hide under the bed. Who put the fork in the wrong drawer? You heard the booming voice. And it was this, and you know what? So what? If it's cold and you put it in the wrong drawer, you don't even have to kosher it. Just take it out and put it in the other drawer again. Nothing happened. There's no heat transfer. But anyway, he didn't know that. He thought that if you put it in the plant for, I don't know, a face, 3 days, a week, 6 months, it was in there. How long, Noreen? 3 days? Okay. You had 3 days. My father might have had a week. I don't know. I tell you something. One time I went into the plant. One day there was a knife sticking out of the plant. I thought, first of all, I thought maybe he killed somebody. I was calling for my sister. Are you there? Anyway, the next day I came in the kitchen and there's 2 knives in the plant. Next day there's 3. I said, what's going on around here? He's growing knives like they're just shooting up everywhere. So the truth is, we didn't know, we didn't understand. There's a Gemara in the Talmud that says you're in the wilderness and you have a knife and the knife becomes, I don't know, forget it. You bought a brand new knife and you took it to go hunting and camping. You're not hunting, but you know what I mean, fishing, whatever. And now you're out there. I mean, hunting, you're going to take a chicken and shecht it yourself, maybe if you're a shochet. My grandfather was a shochet. So you're not such a good shochet. So you brought a salami with you. You brought a vorsht and you're going to have a sandwich. So now you're shechting the salami with the knife. You're cutting the salami. It's nighttime. It's delicious. And you make a sandwich, a salami sandwich with mustard, and you're enjoying it. The next day, you realize there's no more salami. You ate the whole thing. All you got left is a piece of cheese, and you want to make a cheese sandwich. How are you going to slice that cheese with the knife? It's not Eino Ben Yomo. Remember we talked about Eino Ben Yomo, that 24-hour rule? And knives, by the way, don't count for Eino Ben Yomo because a knife cuts. Because it cuts, it doesn't count. A pot does, but not a knife. What are you going to do? So the Gemara says, so you take the knife and you plunge it into the earth 10 times. 10 times. If you plunge it in 13 times, even better. But you plunge it in 10 times and you can't plunge it into the same hole. You have to plunge it into a separate place each one of the 10 times. And then kinuach, the knife will be clean. Because you plunged it into the earth, into hard ground 10 times, it cleaned the knife, and then you can go ahead and have your cheese. You can slice the cheese with that knife because it's a time of tzorech, it's a time of need. You're in the wilderness, you want to use this knife. Well, the Gemara doesn't say that you should go around and always do this with your kitchen. Now, imagine if I tell you all this and then tomorrow you're all in your backyards or out in the field in front of your condo buildings and you're plunging a knife into the ground 10 times. First of all, they'll call the cops. because they'll think, what's he doing? This guy's nuts. He's plunging a knife into the ground. From that Gemara, somewhere, our ancestors came over here from Europe thinking that if you take the knife and you put it into the earth, it koshers the knife, but it doesn't. It doesn't. It's can I use the word nonsense? I don't want to be disrespectful to my father. But if he were alive today, I'd say, Dad, I learned you can't do that. You know, it's not acceptable. You can take soap and water and wash it, and then you can dip it into boiling water. You dip it. You boil water and you take the knife and you kosher it by dip. Everybody knows this. I'm not teaching you how to kosher. You know, for Pesach you can do it, right? We could talk about Pesach separate, but you kosher the knife. So that's better than plunging it into or sticking it and putting it into a plant. So I go, why didn't my father just dip it in boiling water? I think later on, that's exactly what he did. Because as I was growing up, I never see any more knife trees. So he was, I think, already figured it out that you can put it in boiling water. Maybe his rabbi told him that you can do that, and he learned to do that. So we have a lot of things that are I don't want to say mishigas, but a lot of rules that are the physical thing. We physically have to do something, and a lot of things that are experiential, things that have a certain idea, a certain feeling. It feels right. And then we have another issue. And we know that meat and cheese, just because they're near each other. Well, there's a Amber Alert. Did everybody else get that? It's a test for an Amber Alert. Okay. So, you know, there's another rule that if you, what was I thinking about here? I lost my track of my train of thought here. Where was I going? I was going somewhere with this. I guess it doesn't matter. I can talk in any direction, but I think that I was talking about the here in the Hindi. I was talking about the experiential versus the physical. You know, the idea is that we have a waiting period between meat and dairy. So whether you go to a store and it's touching or whether it's not touching, the real issue becomes cooking. When you're cooking things together and you're heating things together, then it becomes something called Taravoid Mixtures. And we have to talk about the mixtures and how they relate to us in a kosher kitchen, because geographically around the world, you know, things aren't exactly followed exactly the same in every region. For instance, we have a rule here in Canada and United States and in Israel that you have to buy kosher bread. Bread has to be kosher. It's from a kosher bakery. You can't just go and buy Wonder Bread. Why? Wonder Bread is made with dairy. If you look in the package, it has dairy. So if you're buying Wonder Bread and you're eating it with a bologna sandwich, like, it's not a good thing to do, right? Because then you're actually taking milk and meat and you're eating them biyachad together. That's asur, that's isser. We can't do that. So you have to look at the ingredients. So easier than looking at the ingredients, if you go to a kosher bakery, they're not cooking with dairy. They're not cooking with dairy. They're not putting milk into the challah. Now, can a kosher bakery make a dairy bread? Yes, they can, but they have to make it a different shape. They have to make it like a triangle, or they have to make it like a circle when all the other breads are being made square, or they have to make something different in the shape, a shinui. You know, shinui means a twist, a change, something to make it different so that you can identify and know, oh, that's the one that's shaped like a triangle, that's a dairy bread. And they'll tell you this is a milchika bread. But you cannot just go into any bakery that isn't kosher and buy a dairy bread. Well, the chief rabbi of France, he said, what are you talking about? Here in France, we don't follow that. And my people aren't going to start following that rule. Nobody's going to follow that. What do you mean nobody's going to follow? You're Orthodox Jews. You're not going to follow the Shulchan Aruch? What, you think you're so special over there? The whole world's going to follow the Shulchan Aruch, but in France, you're not going to follow it. The answer is no, they don't. They go anywhere and they buy a bread. because in France, they followed the rule, you can buy bread anywhere. So the chief rabbi said, you know, there's no point in making a rule if nobody's going to follow it. I think that's very interesting. There's no point in making a law if no one here is going to follow it. It's the same thing with a timer on Shabbos, turning something on and off. Everybody who's from has a timer that turns a light on, turns the light off, but they have their furnace set with a Schmitzik thermostat. It turns the furnace on, it turns the furnace off. It's going off and on Shabbos, but you're not supposed to have the timer turn the radio on. Why not? It's turning on the light. That's electricity. Why can't it turn on the radio? Well, there's many reasons for it. One of the reasons is, of course, that we'll say, we use the term, it's not in keeping with the Shabbos. Well, no, that maybe back then it wasn't keeping for the Shabbos, but today it's in keeping with the Shabbos. Everybody knows the Blue Jays play at 1 o'clock or 1:07, and I want to watch the game, and the TV is going to come on by itself to the game, and I'm going to watch it at 1:07. Well, until that becomes the practice of the community, it can't be considered a rabbinic law, even by the modern poskim, even by the Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbachs of our time, by the Moshe Feinsteins of our time. We'll talk a lot about Moshe Feinstein also, but even by their interpretation, they'll say, you know what, it's not that we don't need it to make your Shabbos beautiful. Your Shabbos can be beautiful even without the radio, as long as you have warmth and you have food and you have heat. And you know, you talk about Kashrut and you talk about Shabbos, it's an interesting thing. Did you know the rule that you can't cook on Shabbos? Everybody knows that. You can't cook on Shabbos, right? Beth, can you cook on Shabbos? No.
No.
So you can cook on Shabbos, but you can cook on Shabbos if you have a way of cooking directly in the sunlight. So it's crazy. So nobody does it. So if you took an egg and it's hot in Israel and you're in Eilat and it's 40 degrees on the concrete, and you take your egg and crack it open on the concrete and it fries the egg, you can eat the egg because it's being cooked by the natural sun. You can't take it, of course, in a pot and cook it on a stove. That's bishul. You can't do that on Shabbos. But if you were to crack an egg on a hot sidewalk and it cooked, you could eat the egg. It's crazy. Well, let me ask you something. What about today? Today we have solar heating, solar cooking. I'll bet you in 2 decades from now, people will be able to heat up their food in a solar heater because it'll become the custom. It'll become the practice. Just like in Israel now, we have solar heating on top of all of the roofs and all the buildings. In fact, they can't build the building without it. It's called a dud shemesh, a container that holds water, but is heated by the sun. And they have solar panels that heat up and heat the water. And they say you can use that on Shabbos. You can use that hot water on Shabbos. Well, if you can do that, why can't we cook on a solar stove? So one day that might happen. People will be able to do it and follow that practice. We don't follow it. We don't do it. So therefore, things that are not the practice of the community, we don't do. And finally, for today, I just want to mention something else that I find very interesting. You have a care worker in the house, a caregiver. Your hairdresser's coming over to do your hair at the house. And you want to make the hairdresser happy. You know that this hairdresser loves McDonald's. She loves McDonald's, and you want to buy her a McDonald's hamburger. You're not eating it, and you're going to serve it to her on a paper plate with a paper napkin, and she's going to have it on a separate cloth and eat it by herself. You're going to allow it into your house because you know it makes her happy. Can you buy the hamburger for your caregiver at McDonald's? Well, first of all, if I went into McDonald's and you saw me at McDonald's buying a hamburger, you'd say, I saw the chazan buying a hamburger at McDonald's. And I would say to you, it's for my hairdresser. And you'd say, sure it is, right? I got a story about that. I want to share you about Kashrut. I had a dog, Barney. Esther remembers Barney.
Yeah.
Barney, Alav Shalom. There's Barney. All right. So Barney was a Brittany. He had an allergy to certain foods, and I had to cook for him. I had to cook his food. Well, it was ground beef with rice, with peas and carrots cooked together. It was something I would eat. You know what I mean? Like you could eat his food, rice, ground beef, peas and carrots. And then you spooned in the nutrition, the powder, which gave him his vitamins. So I would go through this, and finally it hit me. Why am I paying $20 a package for ground beef, for kosher ground beef for my dog? It's insane. He can eat treif meat. The dog can eat treif meat, and you're allowed to cook for him treif meat, and you're allowed to prepare for him treif meat, because I'm doing it in a separate pot. I'm doing it with a separate wooden spoon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm being very careful, and I'm making it right. But there's a problem here. The problem is Marit Ayin, right? Leonard. So I'm thinking, where am I going to go to buy treif meat? Where am I going to go? I can't go over here to Bathurst and Shepherd and buy treif meat because that's my people. And wherever you go, you're going to be seen. So I'm thinking, all right, I'm not driving all the way to North Bay to buy meat. So I decide I'm going to go to Keele and Wilson. There's a Metro store at Keele and Wilson. I don't know anybody at Keele and Wilson. Nobody will see me buying the treif meat there. So I'm buying treif ground beef, and I would buy it. Here's how I bought it. I would buy it like 10 big packages at a time. And by the way, it's less than a quarter of the price as our meat, right? So I buy these packages, and I kept them popped in plastic, and I froze them, and I took them out, and I would use them in this pot that I had for just the dog. And I go in the Metro store, and I'm standing in the checkout, and there's one of our members of our shul, from our shul, and they're watching me buy the treif meat because they were ex-Beth Am people, and a lot of them lived at Keele and Wilson, so they still live there today. But I didn't think of that. So they're looking at me, and I'm saying to them, the meat here is for my dog. Now, I was telling the absolute truth. I promise you, the MS, I'm telling the truth. They're looking at me, and they're probably thinking, sure, it's for his dog. You know what I mean? But it was. It really was. So you do have to be careful about Marit Ayin. It is an issue. But going back to this issue, what if I want to cook? The dog also likes buttermilk. I'm not eating it. The dog's eating it. So now I'm making the ground beef with the rice and the peas and the carrots. It's treif, but I'm not mixing meat and dairy. Now I pour in buttermilk. That I'm now in a violation of a Torah prohibition. It doesn't matter that it's not kosher, the meat. It doesn't matter if it's treif. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's a Torah prohibition. You cannot cook even treif meat with dairy together, even if you're not eating it, even if it's for the dog. You know why you can't cook it for the dog? Because forget about the prohibition of basar bechalav. Now, this is called basar bechalav, not basar vechalav. It's not meat and dairy. It's now meat in dairy. It's mamish inside the together, right? So we're not allowed to do that. Forget about the rabbis, forget about the rabbinic rulings. It's a Torah violation, a Torah prohibition. So what happens now? Now I'm in big trouble. I'm in big trouble because I didn't just break the rule of basar bechalav and bishul, cooking meat and milk together. I broke another violation, and that's a rabbinic violation as well, that you're not allowed to derive benefit from basar bechalav. You can't benefit from it. I love my dog. I pat the dog. The dog comes and hugs me. The dog goes for a walk with me, is my company. He wags his tail when I come home. Therefore, I get benefit and happiness from the dog. So when your hairdresser comes over, you derive benefit from the hairdresser. You have a relationship with the hairdresser. The hairdresser coiffs your hair. I don't have any, but for you that do, and you have beautiful, and you pay her, and she takes the money, and she goes out and goes shopping and pays her bills and her rent. So you are deriving benefit from this hairdresser. You cannot derive benefit from the basar b'chalav. You cannot buy a cheeseburger at McDonald's, even though it's not for you. So if I go to Keogh and Wilson where nobody will see me and I buy a cheeseburger and I say, this cheeseburger is not for me, it's for my barber, I cannot do it because I'm buying it and I'm deriving benefit from the cheeseburger that I bought, right? But I can go and buy a burger technically if it's not cooked with dairy. You could buy a hamburger, even if it's not kosher, and I could say, I want a burger and I want to buy my hairdresser a burger. Because if you're not worried about maridayin, you could say, it's just meat. We aren't allowed to eat a nevela. A nevela means an animal that is not slaughtered correctly, even if it's one of our species, like a cow. The cow is not kosher because it wasn't shechted properly. It's a nevela. Or a nevela could be an animal that was inspected and the lungs weren't clean. They weren't smooth enough. They were smooth, but not smooth enough. That's the whole issue with glatt kosher, which is another whole topic. I want to get started on that because I'm not a big glatt kosher fan because of the feeling that to me, it's either kosher or it's not kosher. But that's another topic for another time. But not to derive benefit. So not only we have the rule that you can't eat or cook basar b'chalav, but you cannot derive benefit from it. So we learned a couple of things today. We learned that there's waiting periods that vary from a Dutch custom to a Germanic custom and somewhere in between. The rule is the strict rule, and the rule which our poskim say that we are supposed to follow is 6 hours. And you can wait into the 6 hours. So there's a leniency to say 5 hours and change. And that's a problem that I have now I have to think about. And we know that there's an obligation to do that, not because of the teeth and because of the body, but because that's our rabbinic ruling. That's the law. And they say it because it's the time between meal to meal. Wait a minute. What did I just say? Meal to meal. Well, wait a minute. What if I eat lunch every day at the same time? I don't vary. I'm not intentionally going to say, today I'm going to have lunch at 3 o'clock and dinner at 6. I'm eating lunch every single day at 2 o'clock. And every single day, dinner is served at our table at 6:30. That's 4.5 hours. There is a leniency to say that if it's meal to meal, and that's your span of time, the period of time that you normally wait, and that's your custom, then you can follow that. But mostly in a time of need. They say mostly in a time of you're in yeshiva, you can't wait, you're in a hospital, they always serve dinner at 5 o'clock, you had lunch at 2, and every day and dinner comes at 6, and there's only 4 hours in between. You're in a hospital, you're in a nursing home, you're in an army, you're in a yeshiva. The rest of us can wait an extra hour if we have to, into the 6 hours. So it's preferable to wait 5 and a little bit. And the rabbis say, don't change it and don't break down the fence. It's a very famous Gemara thing that is said after all of the rulings. So I'll leave you with a thought for the next class, because we're going to talk about mixtures and things like that. But you go to a falafel place in Israel. You're in Israel and you're on Ben Yehuda Street. And they fried schnitzel. They took a schnitzel. So a schnitzel, like a chicken schnitzel, right? And they fried it in the oil and they take it out. And that's the same oil that they fry the falafel in. Next, you want a falafel. I don't want to eat meat. I don't want meat. I don't want meat because I don't want to be fleishik. I want to have a coffee I'm in Israel, so I better go to Aroma. I want to have a coffee at Aroma after I have my falafel. The question is it mamash besari? Is it literally meat? maybe I didn't see correctly and they have a separate tub of oil for the meat and a separate, that'd be different. But wait a minute, they're using the same tongs. He took the tongs and he took the fried schnitzel out with the tongs from the oil. And now you're ordering a falafel. He takes the falafel balls, he puts them into the oil. He takes the same tongs and he takes out the falafel balls with the tongs. Is it necessary to wait to have the dairy, the milk coffee or the ice cream after you eat the falafel? You're not eating meat. So think about that. And we'll continue and we'll talk about mixtures and some of the interesting things that happened in Taravoid next time. If there's a question or a part about Kashrut that you want me to talk about, send me an email. And it's easy, mloomer18@gmail.com or marshall@bethdavid.com. And I will answer it in the next class. I'll answer the question. I'm happy to answer it. And I hope that we enjoyed spending some time together today. And I tell you, I can't believe that 23 of you came and I really appreciate it.
There were more.
Thank you so much.
We were up
Very
to
interesting.
26.
Wow.
Take
Yeah,
care.
we had 26
I
at
love
one
it.
point.
Well, there's more. I mean, there's couples here. Don't forget.
That's right. True enough.
Listen, I'm not counting. I just really enjoy spending the time with you. And it's been a long time since we've done that. So I'd like to spend some more time with you and talk about the things that we do. You'll find it very interesting when we get to dishwashers. There's a whole thing, not that you care about a dishwasher and a sink, but it's very, very interesting about the rules about a dishwasher and the leniencies. Okay, everyone. So have a
Okay.
wonderful day, a Yom Tov.
Thank you.
I hope to see
Thank
you.
you,
all.
Marshall.
Take care and stay well.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you,
everything.
Marshall. Very interesting.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Marshall.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye, Marshall.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Marshall.
Bye-bye.